Hey guys, I'm Alex Giebert with BFE Adventures, and today I'm going to tell you whether or not you should buy the old Africa Twin. Stay tuned. Alright guys, so as you know, I've been reviewing a bunch of the bikes in our stable lately, and the Africa Twin is the newest one in my review series that we are doing on all of our bikes. And I want to cover a few things if you're looking to get into the market or how this bike compares to some of the other ones. So I'll try and keep it short and sweet, okay? So overall, do I like the Africa Twin? Love it. And I have some comparison with this bike to BMW GS, KTM 1190, Yamaha Super Tenere, Triumph Tiger. I have experience with the 800 XC, and then some of the smaller bikes like the KLR 650 and the CB500X. So where does this thing line up? In comparison to them, this is often thrown into the comparison with the other big bikes like the KTM 1190 or 1290s and the BMW GS's, or like the Triumph Tiger 1200s, maybe even the new Harley Pan America. And I would say most of the time this is put into the wrong category, and I mean that in a good way. I would say this thing is better versed when compared to something like the Tenere 700 or the T7. This bike, we'll talk about power, we'll talk about handling, and we'll talk about like ergonomics and creature comforts. As far as how this bike rides, the overall way that I would condense everything to this is a very capable off-road bike that can still tour. Now, when compared to my GS, this thing is not a touring bike compared to the GS. The GS feels like you sit in it. It feels like a recliner. It is very comfy. There's no wind noise. It's a very good road touring bike. Now, it'll still get off-road and get down off-road, but this thing feels so much more at home. Maybe I'll patch in a couple videos. Maybe I'll leave that for some of our other cool videos we got coming out. But we took the bikes out on a little motocross track a couple weeks ago, and this thing immediately felt at home. Whereas some of the other big bikes, they take a little more effort to get rolling around the track. Even my buddy Cody that's he's got a GS as well. As soon as he got on this, or once he got off this, he said, well, I can tell you after having the GS for years, getting on this thing, he was immediately more comfortable on the motocross track. So the best way I would describe this bike is it feels underpowered if you're comparing it to the other big bikes, and it feels like it's a handful if you're comparing it to something like a KLR or like the CB500 or what's something else in that category? Well, those kind of bikes, okay? So this bike, I think the wet weight is somewhere right around 530. I could be wrong with that. Don't quote me on it. Whereas the GS is like 560. I will tell you, this feels 100 pounds lighter than the GS. Just picking it up, moving it around the garage. This thing is easier to move. It's also much more narrow in the seat. You sit on top of it, much more like a dirt bike. So, you know, a lot of these adventure bikes, you feel like you're sitting in them. That's one thing I valued about the GS, but when you're off-road, you kind of want to be on it, more like a dirt bike. You feel like you're on the bike. That's definitely how this thing feels. It's wintertime here. I don't know if you can tell by my breath. I don't know if you can see it on the video. This is not a winter road bike like the GS is. Now, I got heated grips and a bunch of other stuff, a heated jacket, so it works just fine for riding in the winter, but you will be able to tell that this is definitely more of an off-road bike. Power-wise, I always thought this before I owned one. I've heard it a million times that this thing's kind of a turd, and when you're comparing it to some of the big boys, it can feel like that, especially if you're going 60 miles an hour and you want to drop a gear to pass a car or something. This feels kind of gutless compared to the other ones. Now, from a dead stop, I just raced with my buddy Cody on his GS the other day, and they were really close to in a drag race. So honestly, you wouldn't notice that big of a power difference. And honestly, when I'm going 60 miles an hour, I don't really care how much power it has at that point. It's still going to pass a car way faster than a typical car would. So it's totally fine. So power wise, I think this is right around 85 horsepower ish, somewhere right around there. And in my opinion, that is a sweet spot. As far as how the power comes on, this revs high, but it gets there really fast. So for example, you know, we all like to ride wheelies every now and then. The GS took some serious work to get the front end off the ground. Could just be me, but that's how it was for me. This thing is very easy to ride a wheelie on. You can easily clutch it up in the first 2 gears, no problem. In third, you kind of need a hill because the power is just not there, or again, maybe it's my riding ability, but it is more abrupt than some of the big boys. Now compared to like Jeff's 1190, no, this thing's not even comparable. His 1190 will power wheelie easily in the first 3 gears, maybe even 4. So that's kind of the power comparison. And I constantly go back and forth between the GS and the 1190 because it's what I own or have owned, and the 1190 that I spent a lot of time on. So that's what you're gonna hear me compare. Compared to the Super Tenere, again, this is more abrupt. The Super Tenere took some serious work to get the front end off the ground, but you could. This is easier. Same with off-road. It's easier to loft the front end on this. It also might be due just to the nature of how this thing's set up. I will tell you, it feels very nimble and narrow between your legs. So when you're moving around on it, it's very easy to pick it up. Going over logs, that kind of stuff, or even in rocks, this 21-inch front wheel makes a huge difference, I will say, over the 19 on the GS. It's just much more maneuverable, flickable off-road than the GS or the Super Tenere ever was. So yeah, that's kind of how that is. As far as the handling goes, it handles about as you would expect from a 21-inch front wheel. It falls a lot slower than, you know, say like even the old CB500X. That thing dives into corners, but it comes stock with 17-inch wheels. It does not dive into a corner as well as the GS. This one, I'm lucky. This has Öhlins suspension on it all the way around, and so it reduces a lot of the dive. The Africa Twins are known for their really soft suspension, and I will say, even with the Öhlins on here, I have already found the limits of that. We may save it for a different video. Maybe I'll patch it in here, but I bottomed this thing out on the motocross track, had the top box on it, and it exploded, and went my drone and the GoPro, and I learned a valuable lesson there. Don't take your top box on a motocross track. So overall, the suspension stock, I can't speak to it as much, but I know it's super soft, and I will tell you, at least with my riding, I would say I would be what I would consider like an intermediate rider. And if you're pushing the limits at an intermediate level, you're going to find the limits of the suspension. But you know, that's us riding at off-road parks and stuff like that. You know, if you're just taking gravel roads, fire roads, that kind of stuff, this handles it beautifully. And right now I got the Trail Max Missions on it. They claim it's a 50/50 tire. I don't know about all that, but it handles gravel, it handles dirt, it handles all that stuff just fine. And the handling on it is impressive. Again, it feels very narrow between your legs. It's very nimble. It's very flickable on the road. And honestly, I don't possess enough skill to notice the difference. If I were to do time trials between this and my GS, I would probably be pretty darn close on both of them. And I know that this bike can outride my skill level easily. It feels, like I said, what it lacks in dive and rideability on the pavement, it makes up for in its lightness. The way that the motor's set up way down low, the battery's even hiding down here right behind the motor, so it's just very low weight, and it moves back and forth very quickly. So I can't really dog it on the road. If you are doing really high-speed sweepers and stuff like that, that is definitely where the GS would shine, where this would start to falter. But if you're doing hard stuff, like, you know, for us, the stuff that we would ride would be like the Tail of the Dragon, or where we're at in the Midwest, like some of the back roads in Missouri. You know, those are, you know, 20 and 30 mile an hour corners. You're you're not pushing, 60, 70 mile an hour sweepers. So on those roads, honestly, I guarantee I could run with the best of them with this setup compared to the GS or the Super Tenere. So I can't say too much to that. As far as how this thing is set up ergonomics wise, it's very comfy. As far as where everything's sitting, I noticed today I need to rotate my bars up a little bit. That's personal preference, but I will tell you that this seat is unbelievably hard. Now granted, I'm coming from a GS that has a Sargent seat on it. Compared to Pogo's 1190, it's about the same seat, but I know that I'm kind of a wuss when it comes to how sore my backside gets, so I will be putting the AirHawk on that anytime we're doing 8+ hours. A lot of times we will run from here straight to Knoxville or straight to Robbinsville, North Carolina. That's about 9-10 hours straight on the highway. This bad boy's getting an AirHawk on it whenever we do that. Some other things to look for if you're going to buy one, whether or not if you're going to buy one. These bikes can be had for 10 grand, a little less, and they are incredible. This bike is 5 years newer, I think, than my GS was, and you get some of the upgraded stuff. You can tell that it's just a newer bike. So if you're in that price point, it really comes down to what you plan on doing with it. So for us, a lot of our riding around here is within an hour to 2 hours to get to the off-road stuff, and then we like to ride hard off-road. So for me, this just made a little more sense to switch to as my primary bike. So out of the stable of all the bikes we got, this has become my go-to around here, just because it is a Swiss Army knife for more close range stuff. Now, that being said, I would still take it on a long road trip. Anyway, if you're gonna buy one, some things you need to look for. You're gonna want some crash protection. Now, one thing that I would say, and this is just me reading a buttload of forums while I'm going at it, you need at least kind of like a mid crash guard. They make upper crash guards and such. I've seen plenty of bikes or videos of guys on these bikes with these crash bars, and this is perfectly protected between the handlebars with the hand guards and this. This typically stays pretty safe. I am going to put a set of radiator guards on this in case I decide to run head on into some sticks or rocks, but that's coming. As far as skid plate protection goes, the stock skid plate is okay, but I know that this thing is ultimately going to see some rocks in Colorado, and it's going to see a bunch of logs and stuff like that, so I wanted something a little better. Aftermarket skid plates for this are kind of lacking in this upper guard for the lower or below the crash bars and the engine guard. And there's even a well-known video out there, I think, of the 2016 Big Bore Shootout where they punched a hole in the side of the case on the other side. So I did not skimp when it came to skid plates, and I got the Touratech. This bad boy is awesome. This is the Touratech Rally. You're going to pay for it, but it's extremely well built. There's no weld seams, and it's stamped. So it's all smooth, and it looks incredible. So I also like the idea of that, so it doesn't get hung up on anything whenever we're hitting stuff. It just glides right over it. What else? I think that pretty much wraps it up. Something else I'd like to speak to, just because I just got home tonight in the dark, and honestly, maybe this was swapped out before I bought the bike. I don't really know, but the headlights on this thing are incredible. I'm still going to probably put some kind of auxiliary light up here just for if we're riding off-road at night, because it doesn't cast out very far, and if we're going around corners at night in the dark in the woods, I want to be able to see where I'm headed. But as far as road beams, this is incredible. So again, I can't speak to it. These are LED lights. If for some reason this is a 17, if you have an Africa Twin that's a 16, 17 generation and you don't have LED lights, then sorry, I misquoted. And you should definitely upgrade, because the lights on this thing are incredible. That's pretty much it. One last thing I would add, the wind protection on this thing is terrible compared to the GS. Now, if you're coming from like a KLR, or you're coming from some of the other stock windshields, or like even Pogo's 1190 stock windshield, that thing sucked. This is comparable. I put the MRA X screen on it. Love it. That thing is expensive, but it is incredible. It somehow directs air around and over. It's incredible. So I would definitely suggest increasing the windscreen capacity with either some kind of an extension or a new windscreen. But if you do that, you want to make sure and get the Camel ADV windscreen brace. These things have been known to shake off-road and in the wind, and over time it'll pop the welds that hold your windshield in place, and once those pop, you're in trouble. So that Camel ADV brace, I think it's a little over $100, 125 or something like that. In my opinion, it's just worth throwing it on there while you're doing it. It was a super easy install and just worth it for future sake. That pretty much wraps it up from all that I can think of. If you guys have any questions, feel free to ask me. I'd be happy to answer any questions for you. Any kind of comparison I can give, I'd be happy to give you that. Yeah, that's pretty much it. So hope you guys enjoyed the video. Make sure and like and subscribe. And if you have any questions, you can reach out to us on Facebook. You can comment on this directly, or you can also go to our website, www.bfeadventures.com. All right, take care.